Welcome to the Happy Mindset, episode 101. Today's episode is called Interconnected Creativity. Today I'm joined by Kathleen Dutton. Kathleen is an artist, a writer, a lecturer, and a theta healer. On today's episode, we talk about how her life has turned out, how she has gone about doing all these things in her life. She spent about 8 or 9 years, I think, in Hong Kong with an agency called Conran. She was in a creative capacity. While she was there, she learned some Chinese, so we explored the unconventional approach she took to learning Chinese. We talk a little bit about visualization. Kathleen is quite a visual person, so she talks a little bit about how she sees it. She's got quite lucid dreams, and oftentimes she'll dream a project that she actually makes happen in reality after that. So we explore all these different things. Kathleen's an interesting person. She's very curious about the world. She has done a lot of things in her life, so I know you'll get a lot from this episode. So thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you soon. Okay, so thanks for joining us today, Kathleen.
It's nice to be here.
So my first question for you is, who are you and what are you doing in the world today?
Who am I? I would start by saying that I'm a creative person, a creative soul, I would say. And in this time, I'm combining a lot of things that I've done over the years, but maybe doing it in a slightly different way to I've done before. I guess one of the signatures in my life is I'm always recreating myself, in a sense, bringing in the skills that I have and using them in different ways. So, yeah, I'd say I'm a creative soul, and I'm doing creative projects that especially enjoy to do with collaboration.
So, where did your creativity begin for you? Were you always a creative person?
Always a creative person, always. And I've always done a whole kind of range of different creative things and put them together. Or I work with people who have very different skills to my own and work with them. That's like architects, designers who have very different skills to my own, say spatial design or digital or information of a different type to what I work with. So, or in community with people with very different sort of skills to my own. So it's a reoccurring, but in some ways, I'm always working very slightly out on the edge of my comfort zone with things, and with others.
So with the communication with other people with different talents, have you always been good at that, or is that something you've developed over time?
I am a people person. I really like people a lot. I actually find people genuinely interesting. So that part of what I do is, whether I work for a design company or university as a lecturer, I mean, I can actually remember all the students' names. So I must like them. I like them, and I really enjoyed working with them. And so I haven't had to work at that part of it, but I do have to work on the sort of detaching and making sure that I have enough time to recalibrate in between seeing people, because as much as I like people, I actually really like to have a lot of time away from them as well. Like maybe about half and half, sort of time with them and then time to recalibrate on my own as well, maybe about 50% of the time as well.
Would you see yourself as like an introvert or an extrovert or anything like that?
I actually have done one of those tests, the Myers-Briggs tests, and I know that I'm an extrovert who has a lot of introverted tendencies. So, I'm an extrovert who needs to have, like, how I actually recharge is not through talking to people, which is some extroverts, that's how they recharge, whereas I don't. I actually like to be by myself to recharge.
Mm.
And I use meditation. I do qigong. I write and draw, and I like spending time by myself. I could spend a lot of time on my own, and I would be fine. But most of the work that I do actually pulls me into engagement with other people because they're not ideas that I do by myself.
Mm-hmm. So, like, when did the meditation and qigong come into your life?
Well, meditation came in. I was always interested in meditation, actually, even from being a teenager. But from when I was in my 20s, I started to do it as part of my daily life because when I was in Hong Kong as a graphic designer, I was working for Conran at that time, and a lot of the projects were really great, really fun projects, but living away in Southeast Asia, but also having a lot of the pressures of life, I decided to learn how to do meditation as a way to calm myself, but also to help me get focus. And at that time, meditation was more to do with. I tried loads of different types of meditation, like loads, but then mantra I was quite into at that time. Mm-hmm.
Mantra meditation, is that?
Yeah, doing different mantras like Buddhist mantras, and I started off by learning about Buddhism and using that as a way to meditate. And then later I tried lots of different things. I met a guy in Hong Kong who was teaching people to do meditation, but I also came across the Brahmi Kumaris in Hong Kong as well. And so I just tried everything. I was always quite into anything that is to do with spiritual things that ground your energy, sort of calm. My mind's very active, so I really like to do things where they bring that balance. So I started to do that in Hong Kong when I was in my 20s, and it's really has stayed with me for my whole life.
And like with creativity and meditation, how do you see them interact with each other in your life? How do they balance each other out, or do they balance each other out?
They are very much entwined for me. You know, it's now my meditation really does lead me into almost all my creative work, whether it's through meditation, which for me, meditation can take many forms. You know, there's meditation which is to do with the connection to peace and calmness. There's meditation which can be much more interactive, to do with letting things go within myself, or healing myself, or sending distance healing to others. Meditation also takes me into places where I can do things which to do with visualization and that kind of co-creating with the sort of those divine energies, I would say. But also somehow, and the more I do meditation, it also makes things like my dreams more active and focused in a certain direction. So for me, like my paintings, my drawings, my illustrations, my writing is all kind of interwoven with that sort of meditation, but also the dreams that I have, which are very, very, very intense kind of dreams as well.
Yeah, you were saying that some of your dreams inform the projects you start and stuff.
Yeah. Sometimes it just says, call this person, do that. And it's like, okay, like really good dreams. And very often it works out, you know, or it gives me a heads up, like I'll actually dream something like, oh, don't do this bit or only do that bit. Sometimes I dream whole projects, and then It's like when that happens, usually if I call that person, it's almost like they have the same thing. They'll be completely like, oh, and there's people that I haven't known that I've put projects together, or I don't know very well, but the project somehow subconscious has put it together in such a way that I wouldn't be able to do it in my conscious mind. But I feel like it's a cultivation of a consciousness that over a period of time, because now I'm in this daily practice and I've been doing it for decades of meditation, of healing, self-healing, but also the kind of creative things that I do. It's my daily life. It's my bread and butter. It's how I exist. It's kind of in this way. Yeah. And others, yeah.
Do you think it takes time as well for them to interweave with each other, all the things you're doing creatively and spiritually? And
No, for me, it's very intuitive, and it's taken my whole life probably to do. I mean, I think probably when I was born, I was probably a spiritual being, as we all are. And then, I think in my teens and 20s, living in Essex at one point, and then South Kensington before that, different places in London, the kind of growing up through punk rock and urban life made me enjoy life. Yeah, I think I've enjoyed all the things that I've experienced, but also always made me realize that there was something that needed to be in place for me as well, in terms of that spiritual anchor. And for me, I was very kind of, although I tried to explore lots of different religions as well, that's another story. Literally went to loads of different types of churches and temples, and was always asking people, can you invite me to your thing? And I was like, oh no, that doesn't, no, definitely not that, not Buddhism, not Pentecostal, not this, not Catholic, not this church, not that. No, I tried a lot of different sorts of faiths to see if I could find what I was actually looking for was actually meditation, and so when I came across it, I was like, okay, this is it, and I'm here for good. I know, and that's how it was. And I think I might have been about 19 or 20 when that really sort of started to be in place.
Oh, so it's quite early on. So, well, yeah. About the theta healing, when did you get into that then?
More recently, theta healing I did around 5 years ago. I think five, maybe 6. And the thing that got me into theta healing was the fact that I was trying to heal myself. It was again working in a place which in northwest London, which was really close to where I was living, and there was a place that opened up which was healers and creatives. So there was like myself was there, and I was doing things like helping people with their branding, living through values. So I wasn't doing much to do with healing myself at that point. I was still predominantly doing my creative work, but I came across all these healers. So once again, I was like, I think I was just going to try all of them and I'm going to write about them afterwards. So I ended up doing that. And there was a few of us, and we were sort of all trying things, writing things about each other's, trying each other's kind of healing. I was doing Reiki. I learned to do Reiki, and I was doing the thing called soul coaching at that time. But once I was in amongst this environment with all these different healers and tried different things, theta, I had a theta session for migraine, and it was like, it went, I never had it back. And I was like, really? This is pretty extraordinary. Because I'd had migraines. I didn't have them when I lived in Asia. As soon as I came back to England, maybe I was sort of allergic to some kind of aspect of the UK. I had lack of vitamin D and sunshine, maybe. But I got migraine, and they were quite horrible. They would last for days. And as soon as I did theta, I worked with this lady who was a practitioner there. Never had it again. So I just thought I actually have to learn this. Really, I want to know how that worked. And I'd love to be able to use it with my family too and friends. So that's how I became a theta practitioner.
So like from listening to you there, you've experimented with a lot of different things. What's your way of looking at things? Like what's the benefit to having that approach to life of like trying a lot of different things and then just being creative with it?
I don't know what the benefit is. There's just there's it's I'm kind of propelled in the direction of it. It's like I don't think why. I mean, most of the time, or even if it's good, I suppose I hope it's for my own highest good and for the people around me in a conscious way. Curiosity is obviously kind of one of those tugs. I'm very curious about most things, especially if it's to benefit, healing for myself and others. Always had that interest in the environment as well and the planet, healing the planet. So it's like big stuff, not just like healing myself. But I don't know why, I do it. I just do it.
I get you, yeah. I think for me it'd be like there'd be a sense that there's something missing or that I'm not fully living, even though I'm not fully sure why I'm doing all this stuff either.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, curiosity
Hmm.
definitely is a big one. I mean, I'm very curious about many things. And once I kind of get curious, I think, oh, I just need to see how that works. Maybe like someone would take together to pieces a motorbike or something to see how it works or what's wrong with it, how they can repair it. They need to sort of take it apart. I think there's a part of me that's propelled to take things apart, understand how they work, and I've been like that for always, and draw about it and write it and process it. So when I actually learned about theta healing, I did loads of drawings. I filled up sketchbooks because when people speak in the course, how people speak, and very commonly, when people actually speak, they talk in very different ways to how an actual course is like written in a book. So I would find, like when I look at my own drawings, they instantly bring back that moment of when that person was explaining how to actually do theta healing when I was learning it for the first time. So yeah, so I tend to do a lot of that kind of I think through my drawing and take things to pieces in kind of breaking them down. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Hmm. It's quite an engineering mindset actually as well. The reverse engineering things as well to an extent there, like taking things apart, trying to understand how they are formed. I was wondering too, do you have a general process when you go about learning something new, like a general kind of process you do to try and understand something?
Yes, if I'm trying to understand something that's new, I would generally start by asking myself, what are the key things that I would like to learn about it? So I'll decide how I want to approach what are my key questions. And also, again, if I'm working for a client, sometimes it's the same as well. Sort of identify what the key questions are that I want to learn from whatever the subject is. So whether it's exploring a modality or a religion or a product. So it's asking key questions, and then I might start by producing answers, which then lead to more questions. Sometimes I'll do diagrams. I'll break down the information into different kinds of charts
Hmm.
that I can go back to and understand. Then I'll tend to break it down as many times as I can break it down, if this makes sense. So I'll keep trying to break down the information so that it's laid out in a sense to be really clear to me exactly where this comes from, what each of these aspects mean. I can never just listen to what somebody says and write it down. I always really need to know why that's like that, how that's like that, why that's like, yeah.
You're creating your own map of things, your own map to understand things.
Yeah, I'm listening to somebody else's and may start with that, but then I'll kind of create my own kind of mind map. Yeah, you could sort of say it's like a kind of mind map, but it's probably quite personal to me as well, how I would do that.
What was your approach actually to learning Chinese? You learned Chinese, didn't you?
Yeah, when I was in Hong Kong, I learned Chinese through back again. I learned Chinese through daily curiosity, in a sense, that each day that I didn't know how to say something, I thought, I'll ask the secretary or somebody how I say a particular word. Usually the words that I wanted to say. So if I knew I was going to go to the market, I would ask how to say that. So I learned a lot of things through the process of what I needed. And then I needed to understand what they said. So sometimes I have to write, then what they've just said. So I kind of did it like that, which meant I learned quite quickly, actually, some of the very basic things. I could do everything that I wanted to do very, very quickly. But then after a while, the thing that then started to make me very, again, curious in another way, which is the actual characters themselves were really beautiful. And they would write down the characters, if for me to have to do some more complicated things sometimes. And then I started to learn the characters one by one. As soon as
How did you learn?
The accountant said, they're all pictograms, she was explaining about pictograms and radicals and things like that. I was like, wow, that's so amazing, very graphic. So then I started to ask them to teach me the pictograms. I mean, I would ask anyone. And then I ended up going into the anthropology of them. I mean, and then it ended up being like a project of my lifetime, really.
Was that a long, you talking months, years here that this went on for? Like, was it you were just always learning when you were in Hong Kong, like, or?
Always.
Yeah.
It's one of the things when I left, which I felt quite bereft of, is that kind of continuous learning of the characters. But what I did do was I went to the College of it's the School of Orient and African Studies, and I joined their PhD program. They let me join because I was very curious, and the teacher said it was quite curious what I was doing, because they hadn't had like an artist designer doing the kind of things that I was doing with it, because basically what I started to do was to tell stories with individual characters, kind of for me to remember it. But then they ended up becoming paintings and books. Like,
wait, so you tell a story to help you remember the character, is it? You create a story.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you have an example of like
around
a story?
the stories?
Would it be kind of like a short kind of little?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stories would be like, for instance, the Chinese character for the woman. I actually did loads on that particular thing, which is, it looks like a woman sort of with a big belly. So to me, it's like a pregnant lady. But then I thought, then when I looked at the ancient characters, they actually also had like a woman. Some of them looked like they were pregnant ladies. Some looked like they were squatting. I mean, it was like interesting how all these different regions of China, they had over different periods of time, had very different ways of drawing the character of the woman. So for me, it was to do with, I started to tell a story about fertility. I started to tell this story about connecting with other characters, like putting her in the landscape, the moon and the mountains. So telling stories so that I remember the characters, but it was also learning the history of the characters. It was also then putting a modern context into it. So I actually even ended up doing talks when I was doing as a lecturer about, I did the story of the fish as well, which was the history of the Chinese character for the fish. And I think I spoke for 1 hour about that, and had lots of images, because it was talking one character, but we're talking about where its origins were, as well as going into modern times. Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot. It's really easy to kind of go for me to go into that sort of narrative aspect about it as a graphic designer as well, than the visual aspect, as well as the kind of anthropological aspect, and then modern typography and the modern meanings, as well as like its past meanings.
It's very interesting, yeah. Because I can see, like, from that process, you're engaged in it because you're creating that whole experience for yourself of learning the Chinese language. Like, you're not just going to a classroom and it being a standardized way of learning that a lot of people don't get engaged with. You seem to be like going out there and creating your own experience of the language and creating it.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I listened to tapes and things like that, and I really couldn't learn from that. I couldn't learn from that. I didn't remember anything. They said, put it on at night and listen, or I tried lots of things, but doing that I just didn't learn. So it's being interactive in the process and somehow making the process your own that helps me to learn a language.
Yeah, that's good. So even what you were doing to start, that's pretty much chunking. You're like picking the practical stuff day by day. And you don't know how many words you were learning per day, did you? Because usually you'd be like, my approach would be like learn 5 to 10 words in a day, not too much, but do it consistently.
Yeah, probably. I mean, sometimes one word, sometimes it might have been maybe a very short sentence. So, and then, sometimes I'd kind of like those couple of words and use them quite a lot over the next few days. So I kind of was practicing them, probably using them all out of context and stuff. But, so yeah, maybe sometimes it might be 1, 2. I would have said a maximum of 5. Yeah.
How about do you learn anything culturally that stood out in your mind when you were living in Hong Kong that you even brought into your work in some way?
A lot, I would say. Culturally, Hong Kong is just such an amazing, exciting and fantastic place. Sorry, I'm crossing my legs, but I'm just uncrossing them in a very slightly different position. I'm meditating as I speak. But culturally, it's a kind of amazing, dynamic place. But one of the things I really loved about Hong Kong is, well, we see the history and the culture is all tied up with things like the Chinese characters. And I ended up finding out a lot of things to do with the history of Hong Kong, the different sort of things like the Buddhist and the Taoist sort of backdrop of their belief systems, which I found also really interesting. And then in a sort of daily way, the kind of culture, the material culture, I found quite fascinating, but the culture of the people, how people work together a lot in Hong Kong. And I think, in Southeast Asia, you find that a lot, there's kind of much more of a kind of collective energy. There's a thing, people talk about face. They don't like to make somebody look like a fool. Whereas, if you are in England, people love to make each other look like fools. Say it's British humor, things like that. So whereas that you really don't do things like that there. So there's more of the thing that I took from that is that kind of inclusiveness and the working together. I really liked that. I was really refreshed by it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I was reading about that too. Like the Confucius, I think that was influenced a lot by too the philosophy, the collective philosophy. I think China.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, that's another kind of wave of beliefs, was the kind of Confucius and his kind of philosophies, the Taoist philosophies and beliefs. And then, in more modern times, the communist and the kind of Mao kind of period of sort of taking and stripping everything really down to its very simplest essence. And then, in Hong Kong, they actually still use the complicated characters, whereas in mainland China, they use the simplified characters. But in some places in Hong Kong, they start to use the simplified characters as well. But actually, it allows you to read old poems and things like that, because the complicated characters have much more nuance in them than the simplified characters. And you can be more expressive in the way that you actually write them as well. So they have that aspect that when you do calligraphy, you animate the word as well with your own energy, which is another really beautiful aspect of Chinese characters as well.
How do you think about simplicity when it comes to art, and even like what's the dynamic like in your head between complexity and simplicity? Like with complexity, there can be more nuance. With simplicity, there's, I guess, clearer communication. But like, how do you think about this as an artist?
Yeah, simplicity, I mean, actually is very much a thing that I think, strangely, along with this kind of looking at the complexities of things and kind of laying them down, maybe like you said, a bit as like an engineer, then I try to simplify things then as much as possible.
Hmm.
So it's taking the complexity, then simplifying things to whether it's a logo or a kind of graphic project, an idea. I mean, that is another very huge part of the things that I do for myself, and simplify things, distilling things and ideas, I think, is probably another one of my things, major interests, if you like.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, because even sometimes with complexity, distilling it into simplicity takes quite a bit of mastery and understanding to get there, I think.
Yeah, I mean, knowing how much to include, what not to include, what's essential,
Yeah, do you,
what's,
do you struggle with that?
yeah.
Like leaving
Yeah, I
things
mean,
go?
I think that's again, I do think that that's one of my strengths, because as a kind of as one of my main skills as well, not just in visual sort of developing ideas visually, so to create very simple kind of graphic ideas, as I say, through things like logos, or helping people to really distill what's important about their brand, what's important about their, whether it's, again, a corporate brand, or whether it's a brand which is for something which is spiritual, or whether it's a brand for something that's for the environment. Getting your idea to be really simple so it can be seen and understood is a really important part of the thing that I do. Yeah.
Hmm. Oh, good stuff. And well, actually, with visualization, do you have any advice or from your experience to help somebody who wants to be able to visualize a bit more?
I would say visualization is, we do it all the time. If you are a visual person anyway, you probably often having, like visual impulses a lot. If you're a creative person, there are I think, different people Some people don't sort of see in their mind's eye in that way. They don't find it so easy to visualize. But if you are a visual person, then actually, for me, doing meditation and then visualizing based on the direction of where I want to go. I mean, in terms of what I want to generate creatively, sometimes within a project. So that would be just a kind of turning inwards and again, sort of distilling, getting to sort of a point where you're sort of distilling a question, asking something very particular. But visualization is one of those things that there's lots of books on visualization and very different ways of doing it. I think, as I say, as a visual person, I find that it's a very easy thing for me to do. And I think a lot of other creative people would find it a very easy thing to do. Visualization is an integral part of the process, creative process. Putting it down on paper, for me, is another part of it as well, which is really an important part.
And writing's part of your life too. You're writing some books at the moment, are you?
Yeah, and I've written various papers for research. Writing is always part of my thing. I write as much as I draw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference writer, or is it two different? Do you see them as two different mediums?
No, to me they're like pretty much one. They usually come together, the words and image. If I have to write alone, it really, like when I've done things that are more, even when I was doing projects which were to do with more research orientated things, they're full of images as well. So I use images a lot. Yeah.
That's good. So do you have any advice for anybody who's got a polymath tendency and they want to explore their different interests?
I think if you are a polymath and you have these different interests, I think you're almost kind of propelled to explore them and just to be cool with that. And everybody's unique. And my advice is do it and enjoy whatever your unique quality is. Well, your unique qualities, your unique curiosities, because it's a kind of magic. Each person is this magic, and just be your magic.
Good advice. Yeah, I like that. Is there so if anybody's listening, can they reach out to you in any way, or where would they find you?
They'll find me on my website, which is www.kathleenDuttonart.com. It's both art, healing arts and creative arts, and also my email. People can contact me through lots of different forms of social media. Yeah.
Cool. Great chatting to you today, Kathleen. I like hearing about the meditation and the creativity and combining everything together, everything you've done. So some interesting insights you've provided today.
Thank you very much for that.
Thanks
it's great
again.
To talk to you. Really enjoyed it.
Cheers. So until next time, have fun and enjoy the process.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.